Hello everyone, welcome to this presentation about integrating PowerBuilder with Microsoft Entra ID. In this presentation, we'll first of all see what is actually Microsoft Entra ID and how it does compare with the traditional Active Directory we've been talking about for years, and also how it compares with Azure ID that some of you may have used recently. Then we'll see why use Microsoft Entra ID with the PowerBuilder application, and what are the challenges for integrating this technology with a PowerBuilder application. Then we'll see how to achieve a plug-and-play integration using the tool called Visual Guard. And finally, we'll do some clicking to see in action how to set up the system and how to use it in a PowerBuilder application to identify users with their Windows account defined within Entra ID. A word about our company. So my name is Christophe Duformentel. I'm the CEO of the company. And we provide products that help PowerBuilder and .NET developers maintain, improve, and secure their code for a few years now. And we deploy this product in a bit more than 80 countries around the world. We recently developed and enhanced a set of features with a tool called Visual Expert to review PowerBuilder code as well as database code and do some profiling to monitor and improve the performance, the response time of the PowerBuilder application. We also recently released a plug-and-play MFA solution for PowerBuilder, and the point that we are about to talk about today, an integration solution between Microsoft Entra ID and the PowerBuilder application. And we're currently working on something actually very interesting that will be released in the next few months. It's a set of AI-based services that will be provided with the tool Visual Expert, the code analysis tool, for further understanding and improving PowerBuilder and database code, in particular complex code. And we will discuss, I guess, these interesting features in the next few months. So let's see what is actually Microsoft Entra ID. It's part of a suite called Microsoft Entra Family that includes 4 key components. The first one is Entra ID itself, the one that we're interested in today, that is meant to manage user identity and primarily Windows accounts and user authentication for Microsoft Office, but also any third-party applications such as your PowerBuilder application. The second component is called Entra Permission Management, and this is for managing cloud permission across multiple environments, and in particular Azure, AWS, and Google Cloud. The third one is called Entra Verified ID for managing digital and highly secured credentials. For example, that's the kind of solution you can use if you want to sign some document with a high level of security, with a highly secured procedure to verify the ID of the user. And the last one is called Entra Workload Identities. This is for managing access for non-human entities, which means systems, and automating permission for service-to-service interactions. So we're definitely focusing on the first one today. Now, how do you compare Entra ID with Active Directory and what was called until recently Azure ID? Basically, Microsoft solution evolved from on-premise Active Directory to Azure ID and now Microsoft Entra ID. Active Directory, as you know, was initially on-premise and it was focused on the local network access and security. You had basically your Windows account defined and used within your network. Azure ID was an evolution toward a cloud-based identity service integrated with Microsoft Office, but not only, also other cloud applications. And you can consider Entra ID as a superset of Azure ID because it does include Active Directory, but also it expands to a more comprehensive identity solution, including advanced cloud permission management, decentralized identity, and all the modules component that we just saw before. So why use Microsoft Entra ID with a PowerBuilder application? Well, I must say that in the cases I met, in most cases, the initiative doesn't come from the owner of the PowerBuilder application. It's rather a company-wide directive to move authentication method toward this solution, and the PowerBuilder owner is cordially invited to follow the move and find a way to integrate his PowerBuilder application with Microsoft Entra ID. That's the goal of our discussion today. In this way, the company aims to achieve centralized identity management for all its applications, whatever the underlying technology, PowerBuilder, Web Cloud, and other. Basically, you would have one identity, a Windows account, that would be that would access different systems, and you would have a transversal solution to manage access to all those systems. This evolution will facilitate the potential implementation of additional functionalities such as multi-factor authentication, MFA, and single sign-on, also called SSO. That's something we will also mention with Visual Guard integration. It will also enable a centralized management and control of the user permission for accessing the company's various systems, because if you do give access right to various user and system, at some point you need to keep control and you need to monitor who has the right to access what. That's also one of the intention behind the Microsoft Entra family. That being said, what are the challenges of integrating Entra ID with PowerBuilder? Well, as you know, PowerBuilder does not natively support Entra ID, and PowerBuilder developer then have to find a way to establish a secure and transparent communication between the PowerBuilder application on one hand and Entra ID on the other hand. They also have to reuse the existing security defined in the PowerBuilder application that is quite often composed of roles and permission. They are defining the entire security logic to give access to PowerBuilder user to certain feature or data. So the developer have to associate the account that you are defined in Entra ID, Windows account in most cases, and they have to associate them with the existing roles and permission of the PowerBuilder application to keep the music playing. So you will use the Windows account to identify the user, but you will reuse the rest of the security logic that is already existing and defined in your PowerBuilder application. And to do that, they have a classic make or buy choice. Either they develop a custom solution or they buy a tool like Visual Guard. So if you do go for a tool like Visual Guard, what are the benefits for integrating with Entra ID? Well, first of all, you can expect a plug-and-play integration, because in that case, Visual Guard would natively support Entra ID, which allows a quick setup for access and authentication functionalities. Then it's also meant to save cost and time. You will save time on custom development because you don't have to spend time on application integration. And also in the future, you will also reduce the updating cost because you do not have to maintain this custom security code that you wrote for this integration. And you can also, in that case, extend the lifespan of your PowerBuilder application without having to re-engineer the code itself. You will also get a centralized identity and access management system, because all the identities and permission can be managed from a single platform, that is Visual Guard, and that will allow unifying the PowerBuilder apps with other systems that are also secured by Entra ID. You could have in a single list of users managed with Visual Guard access to PowerBuilder, web, cloud application, .NET, whatever. Optionally, if you like, you can just enable the MFA feature that are coming with Visual Guard, as well as the single sign-on. That allows the user to access the PowerBuilder application without entering any additional credential, because you already entered the credential for starting the Windows session. And that's optional, like I said. And finally, you will have all the audit and compliance functionalities available: logging, audit trail, tracking access, generating metrics to know who gets the right to access what, etc., within the PowerBuilder application. So let's take a look at the runtime architecture in that case. Where are the different components, your PowerBuilder application, Entra ID, Visual Guard, etc. So first of all, you would have to define a number of user account and permission, probably coming from Entra ID in the form of Windows account. That's why there is a connection between the Visual Guard server and the Active Directory that is currently running within the Entra ID cloud environment. Once everything is set up, and I will show you later how this is working, the user will run the application. When launching the application, the Visual Guard component embedded in the application will manage the authentication process, whether it's just a Windows authentication where you ask again the user his Windows credential before he can access the application, or if you implement single sign-on, no question asked, you directly give him access to the application, assuming that his Windows account has the right to run it. And if you also enabled an MFA multi-factor authentication option, then Visual Guard will trigger the proper MFA workflow, whether it's by sending a code by SMS, by email, or using Microsoft Authenticator. There are different strategies, but that's another story. Today we'll focus on Windows authentication using Entra and ID accounts. Anyway, the Visual Guard component runtime embedded in your application will manage the user authentication. If the user has the right to access the application, it will retrieve the user permission and pass them on to the application, who will restrict access to functionalities and data as usual. This is where we will also connect the new Entra ID account with the existing role and permission in your application. We will log all the sensitive activities, whether it's we're talking about security event, who's trying to access the application successfully or not, but also business event like I don't know, executing a wire transfer, ordering some sensitive drugs if you're working in a hospital, etc. The developer will choose which business event are relevant for that kind of logging activity, and controllers, auditors at any point in time, in real time in particular, can monitor what's happening, can browse the log to filter out the relevant event, can generate, like we said, metrics to control who has the right to do what, can send alert by email. So there's a number of functionalities that are meant to control what's happening in terms of security functionalities in your application. That's the whole story in theory. Now let's see that in action. So first I will install Visual Guard, and this will install this administration console that we see here, where I can declare a number of different applications, in that case Angular, .NET MVC, and this is a PowerBuilder application that I just declared. I also declared the existing roles that I will reuse to grant access. And now I need to connect to my Entra ID repository. For that, I will open the settings, go to the domain, and you see I've already defined one. I can add a new domain, but let's take a look at what has been already defined here. So you can find here the credentials to connect to, first of all, your Entra ID cloud environment, and then in particular to your Azure ID repository. And I have a number of possibilities here, because you can, if you like, manage your Windows account stored in Entra ID from the Visual Guard console, in which case you can define, for example, if I add a new user with Visual Guard, do I do anything? No, or yes, please create this Windows account in Entra ID. And that's the same for all possible action, deleting user, yes, no, delete, try to delete. If I'm locking a user, if I'm changing password from Visual Guard, you may or may not reflect this operation in Entra ID, depending on your strategy and depending on the right that was given to you by the Entra administrator, Entra ID administrator. And then you also have the possibility to synchronize the attribute of the Windows account defined within Entra ID to get them in Visual Guard and pass them along to your application for many reasons. For example, you can define permission that depend on the country of the user or his position in the company or whatever. So this is optional as well, but if needed, you can have define like that a mapping and retrieve all those properties in Visual Guard and then use these properties within your PowerBuilder application. So when the user will authenticate at the beginning of his session, Visual Guard will pass to your application all those properties for your application to take it from there and use them in a way that you feel appropriate. And once this is done, I will include a couple library we provide in the PowerBuilder application, and that's it. The configuration and the integration with Entra ID and your PowerBuilder application is completed. I can start defining the security. I now want to add Windows account and give them a role to access my PowerBuilder application. So I would come here and can simply add one or several Windows account or Windows groups by looking into my Active Directory. So for this example, I will simply use a local Windows account. It's the one that I'm connected with right now. And I need to select roles to give this Windows account access to certain applications. So in the case of the PowerBuilder application, I will give the role administrator. It's basically full permissions. When I'm done, I see the user account right here. I can at any time edit his detail, the role he has. So you see, for this PowerBuilder application, I do have a role as administrator. And there are additional features that I can leverage later on. But for now, let's keep it simple. Now, if I'm running this application, I should be able to enter my Windows credentials. So by default, it will suggest the current Windows account. I can type my Windows password, the same I'm using to access my Windows session, and that's it. I'm connected with this user, and I have this role for this small PowerBuilder application. So I can keep going like that and declare more Windows account or Windows groups, and at the same time, give them roles to access certain application with limited access rights. Now let's take a look at this node here. I can declare groups of users that would reproduce the organization of my company. So in that case, I've been declaring some divisions, including department, and below each department, I've been placing one group per position in the department. By introducing the concept of group between the Windows account and the application role, this is opening a wide range of possibilities. And in particular, if you have a very large volume of user, you may not want to manage directly the relationship between Windows account and application role one by one, because that may be heavy to maintain. You might want to use user groups in the middle to decouple, on one hand, the application security where you define the role and the permission, and on the other hand, the user management, where every day many people would come in and out the organization, and some people would take care of the Active Directory for that. So the group would be in the middle and would allow to relate application security on one hand, user management on the other hand. There are two models for that, two possibilities. Let me explain. So first of all, we have here your Active Directory with all the user accounts. So there's probably a system administrator or Windows administrator, somebody in charge of maintaining the list of user account with all their details on a daily basis. They will define the Windows account. And on the other end, there's a development team in charge of the application. They know what the application is composed of. So they define the permissions or the roles that are representing implementing the access rights. Could be permissions, could be role, could be both, depending on what you need in your application. And it's all about making a relation, managing the relation between the Windows account, the user, and the application roles. And this is where the two models are in place by using the user groups I mentioned in Visual Guard. So in the first model, You would be delegating to a business manager or somebody in charge of the application security. You will be delegating the responsibility of defining user groups, and it will grant roles to these user groups. This is done once for all because if you remember the hierarchy, I defined the dummy division department role. Well, there's going to be a manager in the HR department, no matter what, even if the people are changing in the company, this department and this position will rarely change. So the relationship between the group and the role is quite stable. Then you can define the group as we did in the console to say, okay, now my Windows account, Christophe, should access this application, but instead of giving this user account directly a role, I'm placing this user account in the group that already has this role. So that's the first possibility, but you can go even further because in that case, with that model, you still have to select which user account you want to declare in the Visual Guard repository and define them as a user. Okay, you can go one step further. You can have somebody in charge of Active Directory defining the Windows account. Okay, it will also probably define Windows groups. Fine. On the other hand, we still have roles and permission. Okay, doesn't change. But what you're going to do is you're going to place not user inside of the Visual Guard group, but directly you're going to place Windows groups. And if you do that, then all this chain of boxes that you can see until Windows group is stable. It doesn't change. It's only on a daily basis where people will come in and out of your organization that the people in charge of the Active Directory will update the Windows account and place them into Windows group. But everything below is unchanged. So the hierarchy of group representing your company does not change. The role they have does not change. And it's only on a daily basis. New people would come in a Windows group and automatically they will be related to a Visual Guard group and they will automatically get the proper role and they will automatically get access to your application. So this new guy coming in your company, once he's entered, is declared in your Active Directory, that's it. He gets access immediately to all the application he should access. So this is a very powerful model, yet quite easy to implement with the console. So let's take a look. First of all, I will remove the role that is directly granted to my Windows account. You can no longer access the PowerBuilder application. If I'm trying to log now that I don't have the role, I get an error message, which makes sense. Okay. Now, if I'm going back to this group hierarchy, let's say that this Windows account is somebody who should be placed in this Windows group here. I would place this guy in the managers of the HR department group. Fine. And if I take a look at this department, and this group in particular, he already has access to a number of applications. He doesn't yet have access to the PowerBuilder application. That's fine. I can just add this role right here. So now anybody who belongs to this user group will get access to all these applications automatically. And because my user is already here, the next time he will access the PowerBuilder application, he will automatically gain access with the proper role that we define here, that we granted to the group. And you can see here that is now accessing via the group manager. So the good point here is what? The people in charge of adding the user and placing the user in this group doesn't have to know what the applications are, what each application is doing, what are the roles, what it should get access to. They don't have to know that. They just need to know that this user is a manager of the HR department, period. And by placing the user in this group, he gets automatically and instantly access to all these applications with the proper restricted role granted to this group. So let's go now one step further and implement single sign-on, still using the user Windows account to authenticate him. users will access the application directly without entering any credentials. They don't have to provide their Windows credential because we will reuse the Windows account that is currently active and for which the user already provided his credential when he started the current Windows session. So we trust this is enough to validate the identity of the user. It's a few lines of code that you can add to enable this single sign-on for this application, and you can choose when to implement it. For example, you can have certain applications for which the level of security of the SSO is appropriate, and other applications for which you do want the user to enter their Windows credential anytime they access the application. It's up to you. Okay, let's see how this is working. So I've been opening here the Appian sales demo application, in which we already integrated Visual Guard. So we incorporated the Visual Guard libraries. Actually, you can see both of them, they are here. And I've been opening here the open events of the application object to define a few basic features when the application is started. We can see here that we've been implementing with a few lines of code the Windows authentication, and we use a logging form where the user can enter his Windows credential. So if I'm running the application, I would be able to access it pretty much like what we did before, by entering my Windows credential. But what I want to do here instead is implement single sign-on. So I will comment this line here and uncomment this one. So what is it going to do? As you can see, we will check whether the current Windows user is authorized to access the application, and if so, then we will open the application silently without requesting the credential. We just load the profile of the user, potentially the role, and pass the role to the application that will take it from there to restrict the access according to the roles. Now, if I try this one, basically the application is automatically starting. And you can see here that it's my PC and my Windows account with the role administrator that I defined before. So this is pretty much how SSO is working. No question asked, direct access to the application if your Windows account has been granted the proper roles. So that's it about our presentation today. There would be a lot more to discuss about multi-factor authentication, audit trail, controlling permission, sending alert, etc. But you can, if you have questions, of course, about those additional features, you can send me a mail to the address that you can see here. But for what we've been covering today, maybe you have questions now, and I'm available. Please feel free to ask them, and I will be glad to answer them. Thank you.